There's a scene in the FBI office right after Adriana disappears that I think about more than almost anything else in this show. Robin is worried. She's the agent who ran Adriana, who sat with her for years, who knows exactly how frightened she was.
Will get us nothing.
She really could have fled. She could be in China by now.
Harris gives her a look, and the chief decides it's time to move on to something else.
How should we handle the other thing, the Nieves murder?
That's it. That's the whole response. They know she's dead. These are people who spend their working lives studying what this organization does to informants, and they're sitting in an air-conditioned office, floating the idea that she might be in China. What gets me is how familiar the reaction feels. I've seen it before, from Tony, at a table in the back of a pork store, when somebody who used to be useful stopped being useful. Somebody's gone, everybody understands, and the business continues. The FBI in this show is supposed to be the answer to men like Tony. Most of the time, they're the same machine with better paperwork. Let's go through how they actually got her, because every stage of it is worse than people remember. It starts with a fake friendship. The Bureau sends in an undercover agent who introduces herself as Danielle, and does it by complimenting Adriana at a shopping mall. They go drinking. Adriana tells her things she's never told anyone. She brings her into the Crazy Horse, around Christopher, into Tony's house. None of it is real. It's an operation, and Adriana was chosen for it because the FBI studied her and worked out she was the softest way into that family. And they read her correctly. Adriana talks too much, wants to be liked, and is stunningly naive for a woman who grew up surrounded by these men. She is lonely enough that a stranger being nice to her at a mall becomes a real friendship within weeks. That loneliness is the vulnerability they identified, and it's the vulnerability they used. The operation collapses when Christopher makes a pass at Danielle, and Adriana blames the woman instead of him.
You were saying she had a nice ass.
I was trying to say something positive because she's your friend.
So the Bureau moves to the next stage and brings her in. They tell her she's looking at up to 25 years for possession with intent to supply.
You'll be placed under arrest and charged with possession and intent to distribute cocaine. A charge that carries with it a penalty of up to 25 years in prison.
Oh my gosh.
Then they tell her the second thing.
You can explain to Tony Soprano why you brought an undercover federal agent into his home during Sunday dinner.
And if he ever finds out, she and Christopher are both dead. Adriana is so frightened she vomits on the table. Sit with the two things they've just placed in front of her. Prison on one side, murder on the other. No lawyer in the room. No way for her to know whether 25 years is a real exposure or a number picked to break her. She hears it and believes her life is finished, which is precisely the intended effect. They never needed her to understand federal sentencing. Terror is faster and cheaper. But the second threat is the one that should bother people more, because of what it actually is. The FBI's entire case rests on the fact that this organization murders informants. That knowledge is the reason the investigation exists. And in that room, they take that knowledge, point it at a frightened woman, and use it as leverage to make her become one. They are threatening her with the exact fate they are about to expose her to. Tony keeps people in line by reminding them what happens to rats. The FBI keeps Adriana in line the same way, except they're doing it to manufacture one. She agrees. And then they discover the problem, which is that she barely knows anything. Christopher doesn't come home and describe murders over dinner. Nobody invites her into meetings. She's adjacent to that world rather than inside it, so what she produces is scraps. License plates, names, half-remembered conversations. Now here's where it becomes indefensible. She gives them almost nothing usable for 2 years, and instead of concluding that she's a bad asset and cutting her loose, they escalate. The pressure increases specifically because her output is poor. Her value to them goes down while the danger to her goes up, and they respond by pushing harder. By any honest reading, the correct decision at multiple points was to let her go. She was never going to deliver a case. The only thing keeping her in that house was the possibility that she might eventually overhear something worth having. Meanwhile, she is visibly disintegrating in front of them. She develops ulcerative colitis and tells Robin directly that she blames the pressure the FBI is putting her under. She says it out loud, to the person applying it, and the operation doesn't change by a single degree, and they know about the violence. Adriana turns up bruised. They know who Christopher is, they know he's an addict, they know what he does when he loses control. They keep her in that house anyway because the house is where the information is. There's a detail about Robin that makes this harder to sit through. She tells Adriana at one point why she became an agent. Her sister was paralyzed by a boyfriend who was careless with a gun, and she joined the Bureau to stand against men like that. So the agent running this operation got into law enforcement specifically to protect women from dangerous men. And what she does for 2 years is keep a woman inside a house with a violent addict because the Bureau needs what she can hear there. And notice what she does with that story. She tells it to Adriana. She uses her own sister's paralysis to build intimacy with an asset. That's the same move Danielle ran, rebuilt on top of a woman who already knows the first friendship was an operation. Adriana understands by now that these lunches are work. She goes anyway because there is nobody else left to talk to, and Robin knows that too. Then they finally get their opening. A man called Gilbert Neves is killed inside Adriana's club. He came to confront a dealer over cocaine that turned out to be mostly baby laxative, and he ended up dead on the floor with his own knife in him. Adriana, high on ecstasy, walked into it afterward and helped move the body. Months later, the FBI develops interest because they have been watching that club hoping for exactly this. They find footage of her behaving oddly around the garbage. They examine the body and find the club's stamp still on the dead man's hand. That gives them an opening rather than a case. They put the footage and the photographs of the corpse in front of her, and she fills in the rest herself, because 2 years in rooms like this have trained her that the only way out is to hand them something. She names the killers. She describes what she did. She just built their accessory charge for them, and she did most of the work. Now they want a wire. She refuses. And she offers them a trade instead, which is Christopher. She thinks she can talk him into witness protection, and the two of them can disappear together. The Bureau says yes. This is the worst decision anyone in law enforcement makes in this entire series, and I don't think it's particularly close. They know exactly who Christopher is. Violent, addicted, a made man in a family that kills informants as a matter of policy. They know he has already put his hands on her more than once, and the chief says it out loud in that room. Without a wire, the Bureau cannot protect her. He says it, and then he sends her anyway. She walks out of a federal building carrying information that will get her killed the second it leaves her mouth, and the people who put it in her mouth have already stated on the record that they have no way of keeping her alive. They do it because flipping Christopher would be worth an enormous amount, which means they've calculated the odds and decided the potential intelligence is worth her life. It isn't their gamble, though. It's hers. They're just the ones placing the bet. He goes for her throat, exactly the way anyone who has ever spent 5 minutes around Christopher would have predicted. Then he calms down, seems to agree, and she thinks she's actually done it. Then he stops for petrol, sees a family with everything they own strapped to the roof of a dying car, and calls Tony instead. Tony rings her and says Christopher has tried to kill himself, that Silvio is coming to bring her to the hospital. She gets in the car. At some point on that drive, the road changes, and she understands, and it finishes in the woods, which brings us back to that office. Robin worries. Harris looks at her. The chief moves the meeting along. Nobody in that room believes Adriana is in China. They are the world's leading experts on what this specific organization does to people who cooperate, and their informant vanished the same week they sent her to confess to a made man. They know exactly what happened, and none of them says it, because saying it out loud would make it something they participated in. So they use the language that keeps everyone clean. She may have run. If Ralph had responded to a dead woman with a shrug, nobody would blink, because that's Ralph. If Tony had done it, we'd fold it into everything we already know about him. These are the people who are supposed to be different, and the response is procedurally identical. The only real difference is vocabulary. Tony would say she became a problem. They say the investigation is ongoing. And none of this starts with Adriana. Pussy set the template years earlier. He gets caught on drug charges, the FBI turns him, and from that moment, his handler runs him on the permanent threat of prison. Listen to how those conversations actually sound. Skip pressures him. Skip threatens him. Skip talks about showing his darker side. Strip out the badge and you would struggle to identify which organization is speaking. And Pussy is committing murder while he informs. He kills for Tony during the same stretch he's reporting to the government, and the arrangement holds, because the closer he stays to Tony, the better the product gets. That's the trap under every informant in this show. To be useful, you have to stay close. To stay close, you have to keep committing crimes. And the entire time, the thing that makes you valuable is the same thing that gets you killed. The FBI understands that equation completely. They keep making it anyway, because the alternative is having no one inside. Then there's Eugene, and Eugene is where I stop being able to see a meaningful difference at all. Eugene inherits money, real money, enough to actually leave. He wants to take his family to Florida because his son is on heroin and his marriage is collapsing, and he has been handed the one thing this life never gives anybody, which is a way out. He asks Tony. Tony says no. He took an oath, and that oath belongs to Tony now, so he goes to the other authority in his life and asks the FBI. They say no as well. And the reason is the part that should make people angry. Ray has just died, which means Eugene's value to the investigation has gone up, because the man who was producing has stopped producing, and now they need Eugene where he is. Read that again. A federal agency refused a man permission to move his family to safety because a different informant's heart gave out. His usefulness increased because somebody else's life ran out. That's a decision a person made in a room. Two institutions on supposedly opposite sides of a war, one built on murder and one built on the law. Look at the same man asking to go home to his family and give him precisely the same answer. Stay where you are. Keep producing. Your family can wait. He has the money. He has a house waiting. His wife is begging him. And none of it matters, because both organizations have decided that his usefulness is their property. He hangs himself in his basement, and Ray, who I just mentioned, deserves 20 seconds of his own. Ray informs for years, comfortably, without anyone ever suspecting him. He talks to his handler like a man filing a routine report. Then one day he has a stroke and dies in the passenger seat of an FBI car, mid-debrief. The Bureau's response is to work out who replaces him. That is how Eugene ends up trapped. One asset stops functioning, so the pressure transfers to the next one. That's the machinery, stated plainly. Nobody is sadistic, nobody enjoys any of it. The mechanism simply requires a body in that seat, and when one stops working, it goes and finds another. Which brings me to Harris, and Harris is where whatever line still existed disappears entirely. He spends years investigating Tony, then he transfers to counterterrorism, and something starts to change. He turns up at the pork store. He eats there. The hostility drains out of their conversations, and something almost friendly replaces it. Tony starts feeding him names of possible terror suspects, and Harris lays out the terms with complete clarity. He would write what's called a 5K letter, a document describing Tony's cooperation, placed in his file, produced for a judge at sentencing if he's ever convicted. So Tony Soprano is now an FBI source, and the arrangement is exactly the one Tony has run his entire life. I give you something, you owe me something. Then Tony asks to be paid. Phil is trying to kill him, and Tony wants a location. Harris refuses at first. Then he rings Tony and tells him Phil has been making calls from a payphone in Oyster Bay. He got that information from another agent he is sleeping with. So a federal agent leveraged a personal relationship inside the Bureau to extract intelligence, and handed it to the head of a criminal organization, knowing precisely what it would be used for. Tony's crew starts watching petrol stations in Oyster Bay. They find Phil. Walden shoots him in the head in front of his wife and grandchildren, and Phil's own car rolls forward over his skull while the family watches. And when another agent tells Harris that Phil is dead, Harris says, "Damn, we're gonna win this thing." An FBI agent has just been told that a man was executed in the street using information he leaked, and his reaction is to celebrate it as a team result. That line is a direct reference to a real case. An FBI supervisor who ran a high-level mob informant was accused of leaking information that got people killed, and was reported to have said almost exactly those words on being told a rival had been shot dead. He was charged years later, the case eventually collapsed, and he was never convicted of anything. But Chase put that sentence in Harris's mouth deliberately, and he took it from a case about an agent who got too close to the man he was running. Harris has a reason, and it's a sympathetic one. He tells Tony that his first posting out of the academy was Brooklyn, that he never liked Phil, and that Phil once tried to set up a rookie female agent to be raped and beaten. So he hates him, and he has cause. But look at what that reasoning actually produces. This guy is worse. This guy deserves it. This outcome helps my side. Tony has spent 6 seasons making exactly those 3 arguments about every single person he has ever destroyed. Harris makes them once and ends up on the phone to a mobster with a location. Now, I want to be fair about the differences, because they're real ones. The FBI is pursuing men who murder for money. Their objective is a prison sentence rather than a shallow grave. Individual agents genuinely try. Robin is disturbed by what happens to Adriana. Harris warns Tony that New York is coming for him. These are people doing a hard job against genuinely terrible men, and the show never draws them as villains. That's what makes it worse rather than better. Nobody in that office needed to be Ralph for Adriana to end up in the woods. Nobody needed to enjoy it, or hate her, or want a single bad thing to happen to her. It only required a group of professionals to decide, repeatedly, over 2 years, that the case mattered more than the frightened woman sitting across the table, right up until the day she stopped answering her phone. The Mafia destroys people with violence. The FBI in this show destroys them with pressure. Tony has beatings, debts, and the woods. The Bureau has indictments, sentencing exposure, and cooperation agreements. Both sides look for the weak point. Both sides press on it. Both sides call it loyalty when it works and a problem when it stops working. And both sides are remarkably good at carrying on afterward. Adriana is dead in the woods because Tony decided his organization mattered more than her life. And in an office a few miles away, the people who put her there decided their investigation mattered more than it too. They just got to file a report about it.